It's Christmas in Rome. Travel with us from Slovenia to Vatican City and learn about the journey of this year's Christmas tree in St. Peter's Square. And we'll also show you this year's Vatican Nativity scene. Did you know that St. Francis created the first nativity scene? That was in Greccio, Italy. We'll also take you to the Basilica of St. Mary Manger to see the first ever figurines used in a crèche 700 years ago. For this and more, Vaticano starts now. This 30-meter tall spruce tree was chosen among all the others in Slovenia's Creche forest to adorn St. Peter's Square this Christmas.
We are glad that this tree will be part of the mosaic of the Christmas story, which we celebrate every year, to remember that God hasn't forgotten us, that He is coming among us even today, and that Christmas is a celebration of this great message.
Velikega sporočila.
Katja Konječnik, a member of the Slovenian Forest Service, says that it was difficult to find such a fine example of this type of spruce canopy tree. After the measurements and legal formalities, Slovenian foresters mark it with a stamp, giving the green light to cut it. Konječnik counts 75 rings on the tree stump, making it 75 years old. Jacob Stumpf, ambassador of Slovenia to the Holy See, says that the age of the tree brings hope, as it started to grow in 1945 after the Second World War, and its height of 30 meters is also symbolic for Slovenians.
It is the 30th anniversary of the so-called plebiscite national referendum on the Slovenian independence, and we are going to express once again a kind of great gratitude and appreciation for all the support that we had 30 years ago in that process, be it from the part of the Holy See and especially personal support of the Holy Father John Paul II, who really supported this process of Slovenian independence.
Slovenia already donated one Christmas tree to Pope John Paul II in 1996, and the ambassador is excited to give the country's second to Pope Francis. After a 3-day drive from Slovenia, an 18-wheeler rolls into St. Peter's Square to drop off the Vatican Christmas tree. At exactly 7 a.m., the square wakes up to the sounds of the workers setting it up.
Besides the so-called big tree or the major tree for the St. Peter's Square, it is usually also that you provide smaller trees of different size to be placed then in different offices within the Vatican or different places within or even around the place, and we decided also to give one special tree, smaller one of course, to this structure for the homeless people, which is next to the St. Peter's Square.
Slovene florist Sabina Šegula, together with Peter Ribic, has been decorating the Vatican for Easter and Christmas for 8 years. But this year, representing her homeland is a special honor.
We are really proud that we can decorate it 11 of them. So for those trees, we started to have some workshops in Slovenia, and it was from all part of Slovenia, all regions, from the northern to the southern and also west and east. So together around 400 people working this decoration, and it was really hard because of Corona time. So we started with some workshops for mentors. I teach them how to do it, and I also made two videos about 30 minutes and put it on my YouTube channel, that they can see how we can work with this material, because material is really unique.
The material was chosen according to the placement of the trees. The outdoor spruces are decorated with straw and laser-cut plywood ornaments, and the indoor trees with curly wood shavings.
We made some bird that is like Holy Spirit, and also we made some circles. And the circles like this, it was made by small children. 3 years old children started with such ornaments, and it means together we are in the circle of the family and we are really strong and safe. And then we have asymmetric heart, because each person is unique, and we give our love on own way, so that is why each heart is different. And final, we have some wood bloom, but it means 5 loops means 5 continents. So words should become strong, because we should be together, and then we will have the better time.
Many of the decorations for the Christmas tree were made specifically for the Vatican homeless shelter by homeless people from Ljubljana, the capital of Slovenia. Šegula says that the main theme of this Christmas is unity, unity with God and others, and striving for harmony between the two.
Still Nacht, accendiamo l'albero del Natale 2020.
On December the 11th, the Slovenian Christmas tree was illuminated in St. Peter's Square for the first time, shining forth the message of hope and unity. In a few moments, we'll be back with more on Vaticano. The world is celebrating the birth of Jesus. In Europe, nativity scenes and Christmas trees continue to be set up in spite of the pandemic. Poland welcomes Christmas under a blanket of snow. And Christians in Iraq have built an artificial spruce tree surrounded by palms. Franciscan custodian of the Holy Land, Father Francesco Patton, arrives in Bethlehem on the first Sunday of Advent to open the Christmas season. The day starts with a procession to the Church of the Nativity. This year, with a limited number of people, but with the same joy and reverence as every year. Despite the pandemic, Christmas celebrations aren't cancelled in Bethlehem. Although, just as in so many places worldwide, including the Vatican, the number of participants has been reduced. Only 50 people attended the Christmas tree lighting ceremony in Bethlehem's Manger Square this year. Assisi is another city directly connected to Christmas because of St. Francis and his first representations of the nativity scene. In the Franciscan spirit, Assisi decided to bring the joy of Christmas by transforming the city into their own Bethlehem in a completely new way. The facades of the Basilica of St. Francis and the Cathedral of St. Rufino were lit up with video projections of the Nativity of Jesus and the Annunciation of Mary. When night falls, every 30 minutes, the nativity scene disappears and a light show brings the frescoes of Italian painter Giotto, found inside the basilica, to life. The Franciscans wanted to bring this beauty and joy to the whole city of Assisi in the dark hours of the day.
Abbiamo voluto realizzare un
The Franciscan custodian of the Sacred Convent of Assisi, Father Marco Moroni, says that with this year's many hardships, they wanted to remind people of the birth of the Lord, to feel His presence accompanying us on this journey. When we immerse ourselves in the Nativity, Father Moroni says, God immerses Himself in us.
E lui si immerge nella nostra umanità.
There's also a life-size nativity scene composed of 50 shepherd statues and a nurse to honor healthcare workers during the pandemic. Those who can't visit Assisi can view the spectacular light shows on their website, natalitdifrancesco.it.
Noi siamo chiamati ad accendere questa luce dentro.
Press director Father Enzo Fortunato says the beauty of these light projections should remind us of the light that guides us through life's surprises. The beautiful light projections will be available for viewing through January the 6th, the Feast of the Epiphany. The tradition of setting up a nativity scene for Christmas was started by St. Francis in the year 1223, here in the Italian city of Greccio. Located at the heart of the Apennine Mountains and surrounded by oak forests, the town is perched atop one of the hills overlooking the Reatina Valley, also known as the Sacred Valley. Struck by the breathtaking beauty of the countryside, which reminded him so much of the holy city of Bethlehem, St. Francis had the idea of reliving the mystery of Christ's birth.
Perché Francesco aveva un desiderio, il desiderio di
Francis had one dream, to relive with his own eyes what newborn Jesus had suffered for humanity. And this dream of his came true on Christmas Eve 1223, when he asked his friend and owner of these caves, Giovanni di Greccio, known as Il Viltia, to prepare in that cave what was needed for the event. All Francis needed was a stone, which is still there, a bit of hay, an ass, an ox, and an altar. Some say there was a baby or a representation of a baby. Others don't mention this at all. During the celebration, Giovanni Vellita and others had a vision. On the stone, they saw a baby waking up from a long sleep. The baby smiles at Francis, and Francis embraces him and adores him.
E sorride a Francesco, e Francesco lo abbraccia e lo adora.
And it was precisely in this place, in 1228, that the hermitage of Greccio sanctuary was established. It was the same year the church celebrated the canonization of the Saint of Assisi. The heart of the hermitage of Greccio sanctuary is the cave known as the Chapel of the Crib. On the altar of this chapel, you can see a section of the original stone on which St. Francis placed a representation of Jesus during the first living nativity scene in 1223. The frescoes that adorn the front walls of the chapel in the cave depict two closely interwoven scenes: the Nativity in Bethlehem and the Nativity in Greccio. As the sun sets on the hermitage of Greccio sanctuary, the lavish ornaments disappear and its austerity and simplicity remain. The modest sanctuary, sculpted in the rock, has become a new Bethlehem, the birthplace of the nativity scene. The idea of the nativity scene spread quickly, and in 1292, Nicholas IV, the first Franciscan pope, commissioned statues from Italian artist Arnolfo di Cambio to represent the nativity scene in the Roman Basilica of St. Mary Manger. Professor Sante Guido, a Roman restorer and art historian, brings us inside the basilica's own Sistine Chapel, where these original figurines are now kept at the altar of St. Jerome.
In questo caso Arnolfo di Cambio realizza
In this case, Arnolfo de Cambio realizes, we don't know how many figures made up his manger, but we keep at least 5 figures of the first manger scene in Christian history, which are St. Joseph on one side, the ox and the donkey, and on the other side, the 3 kings. 2 on foot speaking with each other because they are observing this very important event. They arrived after a long journey, and finally they are in front of the Lord. The other, instead, is on his knees in prayer. He has just offered his gifts to the child Jesus. The statue that we see, Mary enthroned with the child Jesus, is not the original.
non è quella originale.
Professor Guido explains that 15 years ago, the statues were moved from their original place to be restored, and it was then discovered that the statue of Our Lady with the child had been resculpted in the 16th century.
Vediamo quindi in questo blocco di marmo con la raffigurazione di Maria e il bambino.
So we see in this block of marble with the depiction of Mary and the child, the original statue from 1292 that was sculpted to be a more modern image. The image of 1585 meant to preserve the sacredness of the figure that had been really damaged. 300 years after its creation, it was carved there on the front.
Quello che però osserviamo qui in questo momento è
But what we observe here at this moment, present in the chapel of St. Jerome, was not made for this chapel, nor was it made for the altar of St. Jerome. It had been placed here 15 years after the restoration.
portare il presepe nella cappella a lui dedicata.
But the original place of the first nativity scene in the manger was inside this tiny chapel dedicated to the Nativity. And this year, on December the 8th, Pope Francis celebrated Mass here. Ever since the first nativity scene at St. Mary Manger, the tradition of creating the crèche in all shapes and sizes had spread throughout the world. After the break, we're going to discover an unusual nativity scene in St. Peter's Square. We'll be back after a short break with more on Vaticano. This year, the life-sized figurines in the nativity scene in St. Peter's Square come from the Italian city of Castelli, known for its ceramic industry. Alessia Di Stefano, a representative of Castelli, gives us the key to unlock this unusual Christmas crèche.
C'è molto di metaforico in questo presepe.
There is so much that is metaphorical with this nativity scene. It has been designed so to give another significance in addition to the one that is evident. For example, the Madonna has a mantle entirely covered with stars. These stars are the ones normally depicted on the Madonna's head, and that here come to envelop her in the embrace of the divine that extends over the Madonna. The Madonna's colors are exactly the same as St. Joseph's, but inverted to symbolize a different walk to holiness and towards the divine. The Madonna was born without original sin, thus the divine embraces her from the first moment. While on the other hand, Joseph must be able to shed that cloak of humanity, shown here as brown earth tones, to be able to practically come down and touch the infinite.
Praticamente a toccare l'infinito.
Di Stefano explains that only 19 statues of the 54-piece set have been brought to the Vatican.
Abbiamo scelto di rappresentare la Sacra Famiglia.
We have chosen to represent the Sacred Family, the Magi Kings, and then one character each representing the principal groups. So a character representing the shepherds and one representing the pipers. We have also decided to bring a statue of the astronaut, which enriches our nativity scene because it celebrates an important event of the history at the time the nativity was created. So in 1969, the astronaut was created specifically to celebrate the first man landing on the moon.
Proprio per celebrare l'allunaggio.
The figures were made between 1965 and 1975 by teachers and students of the local school of art called Francesco Antonio Grue.
Our students and teachers that created the Nativity decided to create a totally innovative style, but in some way tied to the Castelli tradition. For example, the colors that appear in the Nativity scene are the 5 traditional colors of Castelli.
A crystal background represents the landscape of the city of Castelli, which is at the base of the Gran Sasso mountain, the tallest mountain in the Apennines. Ahead of the opening ceremony of the Vatican's nativity scene, Pope Francis met with the donors of the Christmas tree and nativity scene.
The
Holy Father thanked them for their donations and reminded them that the essence of the feast of Christmas is Jesus, who's our peace, joy, strength, and comfort.
Potete accendere la luce e si può scoprire il presepe di Piazza San Pietro 2020.
When evening came, the nativity scene was unveiled and the Christmas tree lit, marking one step closer to the birth of Christ.